You'll notice that there are many outfit changes in this week's video because when I had originally filmed the video that was supposed to be last week, my original intention was to have all 4 undergarments in one video. But what I had realized when I was editing the content is that I didn't have time to deal with that, and I also was super duper overwhelmed. So I decided to cut the video basically in half. And so the first video was just the petticoats, and this week's video is going to be about the knit combinations or union suit and a little bit about the corset that I was wearing. We're gonna jump sometimes to the footage that looks very similar to last week's footage because it was filmed at the same time, but I just kind of want to give you guys a heads up that yeah, we did things a little bit out of order, but I have a lot that I want to share with you about these knit union suits and combinations that I actually didn't record last week, and so I want to do them with you all today. That is what we will be doing today, my friends. Let's take our sip of go-go juice.
It's underwear. Sometimes you're big,
One of the most common questions that dress historians and historical costume makers get asked, especially on ye olde timey internets, is what did underwear look like, or did people wear underwear back then? And then when they read or hear the response that starts with they didn't wear underwear ... sometimes people's brains start to melt down because when we, dress historian people, say underwear, what we mean are underpants. That small piece of cotton fabric with 2 leg holes in it. But sometimes the collective just think that no underwear was ever worn, and confusion, chaos, and clickbait wreak more havoc than Agatha Harkness. But the thing is that historic undergarments are actually a fascinating point of study for historians because not only do we get to look at actual Victorian secrets, but by studying undergarments, we are also able to understand how the past viewed and understood hygiene, health, bodily cleanliness, and going to the bathroom. And as I am sure many of you who are familiar with my channel can expect, not only do I love a good power sleeve, but this bitch also loves a good research rabbit hole. So this video is going to be a celebration of my underwear rabbit hole. I feel like there's a joke in here somewhere, but I'm having a crappy time trying to find the punchline right now. So today we are going to discuss the innermost layers of my mid to late 1890s wardrobe project, my knit combinations or union suit, and a bit about my snazzy new corset that so many of you have asked about in last week's video. And while I know my corset is snazzy AF, I have to be honest with you all, the knit combinations are actually genuinely the coolest thing I've made in a long time, and here's why. Traditionally speaking, underwear for women throughout the past 500 years has been based on variations of a T-shaped tunic dress known as a smock, shift, or chemise, depending on what century and what country you're living in. This undergarment was almost always made out of linen because of the fiber's amazing wicking properties, as well as what we now understand today, its natural antimicrobial properties too. Linen dominated cotton as the fabric of choice until the first half of the 1800s when the American cotton industry went on a massive marketing bender. And yes, this marketing push and its success has had a lasting and deeply problematic impact on our society. However, this video is not about the American cotton industry, but is instead about my underpants. When I began researching 1890s underwear options, I went in already slightly annoyed at the idea of making a chemise. And as I have also said a few times on this channel, I am very much a Taurus sun with Venus and Taurus at heart. I don't really care for overly frilly and impractical underwear that is a lot of work to make. I thrive in comfort, effectiveness, and simplicity. At first, I was thinking I could just make plain cotton combinations, which for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, it basically means a crotchless onesie that is worn as your undermost layer, but I was still super annoyed by the idea because frankly, white on white sewing is boring. It's so boring. It's boring to sew, it's boring to film, it's extremely boring to edit, and I don't think there are enough memes in this world to make that video exciting to watch on YouTube. I've already done one white shift video, and I had to throw in an actual dance party to attempt to make it entertaining. So as I was sifting through every ladies' home journal ever published in the 1890s for information on chemises, I began to notice something extremely interesting. Chemises were no longer popular. Oh yeah, magazines were talking at length about how women were leaving off chemises because of how bulky they could be under their corsets, how uncomfortable that was, how hot that could be in the summer, as well as how that could result in bodices not fitting properly and making the woman look frumpy. As a result, more fitted and slimmer alternatives were being favored. One very popular and heavily advertised alternative were knit union suits, or even just knit vests, read tank tops, made out of wool, silk, or lisle, which is a particular type of cotton yarn, worn with woven cotton drawers under the corset as separates. Yeah, you heard that correctly, my friends. The 1890s were all about that tank top life.
Okay, but like I was also doing research and I found these references to women wearing black wool riding tights to help keep warm in the wintertime, and then bam, like this ad shows up and she's wearing black leggings. Like we can confirm those are black leggings. So black leggings under your skirts, ladies, historically accurate. Oh my god, it's like the best day ever.
Additionally, advertisements for knit union suits far and away exceed advertisements for chemises. Two brands in particular never failed to have ads that made me laugh and cringe in their monthly magazine ads. The first being Lewis union suits, and the other, my personal favorite, the Onetta union suit. While Lewis union suits look similar to what we'd call long johns today, the Onetta union suit ads made me stop and do a double take with their selling points. 1. More easily and quickly put on and off than any other made. 2. Entirely elastic in every way and perfectly self-adjustable. 3. No buttons under the corset, which hurt and injure. 4. No inelastic stay down the front, eventually causing uncomfortable tightness. And finally, the most interesting point of all, allows corsets one size smaller. Okay, here's the deal, my friends. I'm vain. I fully admit that I am vain, and when I wear a corset, I like to lace down. It's not for everyone, but it's something that I like to do. So when the Onetta told me that I could lace down more easily in their union suit, and then I decided that a knit union suit was for me, who would have thought that 130-year-old marketing would be so effective? You know what else is effective marketing? YouTube sponsorships. Which brings me to the sponsor of this week's video, my most beloved and cherished HelloFresh.
I'm gonna be honest, while I love cooking, I get stressed out by menu planning. Most of my day is spent focused on my work, and taking time to sit and try to think up recipes to make for dinner just sends me into a stress spiral that leaves me super grumpy. We've been using HelloFresh for several months now, and I am so happy with their product and service. There are loads of great meal options for all different dietary wants and needs, from low carb to vegetarian, and HelloFresh has more 5-star recipes than any other meal kit out there. It is such a huge weight off of my shoulders to be able to end my workday, walk into my kitchen, grab a meal kit, and just make it without having to dig through my fridge or pantry for ingredients. I am also really bad about buying more than I need at a grocery store, so I love how HelloFresh only sends exactly what I need, and there is hardly any wasted food. HelloFresh also makes sure that I actually bother to eat a vegetable once a day, so 10 points to adulting. In addition to making my life so much easier, HelloFresh is committed to making everyone's life a bit better with a push towards sustainability, with recyclable packaging and offsetting their carbon footprint to donating meals to those in need. If you would like to give HelloFresh a try, go to HelloFresh.com and use the code 12ABBY to get 12 free meals, including free shipping. That's right, you'll get 12 free meals, including free shipping, if you go to HelloFresh.com and use the code 12ABBY.
Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this week's video. Once my decision was made, I went off to see if I could find any original knit union suits in museums that could help me understand their construction and patterning. And damn, did I not actually hit the jackpot at this with the Victorian Albert Museum. This knit union suit, or combination as I'll be calling it from here on out, was exactly what I was hoping to find. It's sleeveless, crotchless, buttonless, and comes from around the same time period that I am working in. And while the earlier examples in the V&A don't have any additional photos, this one from the early 1900s has loads and loads of great photos in its file, so I was able to get a pretty good idea of its unique construction. I knew I wasn't going to be able to reproduce it exactly because I do think that this combination was knit to shape, but I was able to get some construction ideas. So, using the original examples in the V&A collection, I set off to figure out how to pattern this late Victorian onesie. The first thing I did was search period drafting manuals to see if I could, on any off chance, actually find any information about knit combinations, and when that unsurprisingly failed, just combinations in general. I was able to find a couple of books on drafting combinations using woven fabric, but all of the top halves had darts, buttons, little sleeves, etc., and I didn't want to deal with all of that. So I decided to pull a pattern from a modern tank top in my closet and use that as the base for the top half of the combination. For the bottom half, the first drafting manual I used was an updated 1904 version of Margaret Blair's system of sewing and garment drafting. Her 1897 book was what I used for my petticoats in last week's video. While combinations weren't included in the 1897 book, the updated version does include a lot of new information in patterning and drafting combinations. So I used her suggestion on how to adapt her drawers pattern for combinations, And then I got scared because the crotch and the leg lengths were like super weird, long, and awkward looking. However, this is why we make a mock-up. And since this was my first time ever sewing with knits, I wanted to make a mock-up anyways, just to kind of get comfortable with this whole like sewing knit thing in general. Now, as much as I would love to show you the mock-up and how it fit and show you what I didn't like about it on my body, I will not be doing that because it would get me demonetized faster than you could say demonetization. And let's just say it would look like something that would have done really, really well on OnlyFans, but not so well here on family-friendly YouTube. Weird sex suit. That's what it looked like. It looked like a weird sex suit. Just, it was weird. Okay, so yesterday I worked on my initial pattern for this knit combination, this knit union suit. And the first draft, it was wearable, like it was functional. I have it here in all of its white knit glory. I made some markings on the garment itself, what I liked, what I didn't like, what alterations need to be made, additions to the flat pattern. And then I also found, I went looking through this cutting manual, but I didn't find it initially, but the Cutter's Practical Guide from 1892. And they have a really great shape for combinations. And it also looks like some of the combinations that I've seen in the Victorian Albert Museum that are knit. And so I'm just gonna try to look at this and then look at my pattern and then just make some of those adaptations, which actually kind of line up to what I was marking on my mock-up. And then we're just gonna go for it. The nice thing about knit is that it's really forgivable. It's also underwear, and so really I'm being kind of extra making this anyways. Hopefully I'll be able to show you the finished product to some degree, but since it is my underwear, like you're probably not gonna be able to see it like in its entirety unless I put it on a mannequin. So just a heads up, we're going on this journey together, but I don't know how much of the finished product I'm actually gonna be able to show you. Yeah, let's adapt the pattern. I'm gonna need a front and a back for this, and then let's get to it. Okay, so the adjustments I made for my combinations were pretty minimal. Mainly, I added a little bit more room in the bust, waist, and hip, so that way it wasn't super tight. And then I also lengthened the leg a few inches, so that way my knees were covered. And I adjusted the fullness and curve around the crotch so I would actually have coverage there. The differences between the front and the back pattern were minimal, mostly just having a slightly lower neck in the front. Not that that actually mattered, because I never bothered to mark it on the finished garment. Oops. For the fabric, I used 100% single cotton knit with a fairly open weave and a good amount of drape. I wanted to be able to see the knit structure in the fabric and have something that is lightweight enough to be cool and comfortable. One main difference in the construction of this combination that is different than the originals is that I had to stitch a center front and center back seam. I spent way too much time trying to figure out a way to avoid that, but with the split crotch, I just couldn't figure it out. My brain just said, no, we're just gonna seam this up and we're just gonna deal with it, okay? You're just gonna have to accept it. I stitched up the center front and center back seams first, and then did side seams and the inner thigh. For the knee, to finish it, I bought some ribbing from Mill End and I copied the construction using my t-shirts as guides because, I mean, like, they're right there. I left the split crotch and armholes just serged, and then I added a bit of cotton lace to the neckline for a little bit of pizzazz. I'm super happy with the fit. My only critique of the pattern itself in here, I'll do this. One, I didn't mark a front or a back, and so I'm like, I don't remember. Oopsie. Oh, you know, I think I actually had this on backwards. Oh well. I ended up, I think, over sewing the neckline a little bit. It is serged, it is double stitched, and then I actually applied a little bit of lace to the neckline just to kind of like jazz it up a little bit so it's not like super like, you know, undershirt looking. It's a little bit fancier. But because this isn't elasticated, it is very stiff. That's what I was seeing in the couple of originals that survive in the V&A collection. It is very high up into the armpit which is good. It helps keep everything kind of contained. It sits really, really nicely on my shoulders. It is full coverage on the bottom. It's just super sheer, which is why I cannot show you the whole thing. So that's really it with the knit combinations. It was super fast to make. It was super easy to make once I got the pattern sorted out. And I love how comfortable they are. I love that they're historically accurate. Basically a onesie. Like, I'm just gonna walk around like a little romper. The next piece that I made was the corset that I have on. And this corset, it is finished. I even added lace, and you guys, as I've said, like, I'm not really that big into it, but I kind of decided to be a little bit extra for this corset. So it's the ballerina corset pattern from Boudoir Key Patterns, and it's a fixed size pattern corset. I was thinking about what I wanted to do differently for the 1890s. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was have a much more pronounced bust shape, a much more curved bust shape versus shelf. And then I also wanted my hips, instead of them wasping in at a harder angle and then angling back out, I wanted them to kind of have that hip shelf, because you see that shelving in 1890s skirts, and that is part of the silhouette. And so when I saw her finished version, and hers was intended for 1890s, I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I was able to find references to 1890s corsets in ladies magazines that were very similar in their cut to the one that she created. What I loved about this pattern is that it's super fast to make, it's super fast to sew. The curves are really, really strong, and they're really, really harsh. So I do have some wrinkling at the hips, in part because of just trying to get that angle and like stitching everything. When I was originally making this corset, I kind of was viewing it as a very functional mock-up. I wasn't thinking of it as like, this is the final version. I was like, okay, well, I think I'll just kind of treat this as like a fancy mock-up, a wearable mock-up, and then I can always make another one if I want to. But the reality is once I finished making it, I was like, it's good enough. Like, it's fine. Didn't have to do a lot of adjustments to it. I had to lengthen it by 1 inch because I have a long torso, and it was just a little bit on the too short side. Frankly, it probably could have gone up another 1/2 inch, because I have a little bit of wrinkling right here, because there's literally just nothing here. Like, my breast tissue sits up a lot higher than that. So I probably could have raised it up a little bit, but I am also super secure and very, very comfortable in it. So I have few to no complaints. And so I ended up having to take in a little bit at the sides just to kind of make sure, because it was gapping too much at the sides. And so I took in probably actually about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch up there, because it was a lot. You can see I still have room like here. So I ended up taking some in there. I ended up lengthening it about 1 inch. The one alteration that I also should have done is I should have added just a little bit more at the hip. It is just, like, I'm fine, it's breaking in, the corset is seasoning, I'm becoming more comfortable, but I can feel pressure points because there's just, it's like just not enough room in the hip. You know, like just not enough, that if I had just expanded it just a little bit more at the angle at the bottom, it would have been a lot better. But it's okay. Like I said, it's fine, it's comfortable, I can wear it. I'm sitting here talking to you guys in it, it's breaking in, it's fine.
All right, so for the corset construction itself, I don't really have that much to say about it, because it's basically identical to the corset I made earlier this year in construction. However, if you haven't seen that video, here's the basic rundown. It's super easy. I cut everything out of a single layer of white cotton coutil, and then I stitched up the seams wrong sides together, with the seam allowance coming to the front of the corset. Then all you do is trim and press the seam allowance open. And then I cut my boning casings from a bright blue silk satin. I followed the double bone at each seam technique that the pattern recommends, and then I boned the corset with synthetic whalebone. From there, I got a little bit fancy, and I also decided to floss this corset for once. Not that I ever usually do that. And I also decided to add a bit of lace because apparently I really wanted it to be like, I don't know, like what is wrong with me? Why did I do this? Oh well, it's like fancy, so it's fun. I didn't actually bother to get any footage of this because I did all of that sewing at night after dinner in the dark, like with a lamp while watching Schitt's Creek with my husband. So you're just gonna have to like imagine what that looked like in your mind and it'll be great. But you know, it's sewing. It's all good.
I probably could have made it a little bit bigger in the waist because I do have a pretty decent gap in the back. But like I said, since my body has been fluctuating so much over the course of this year and I've gained weight and, you know, once I start exercising and moving again, it'll go back down. And so I don't really know what's going on with my body right now. I figured it was better to err on the side of the corset being a little bit, quote unquote, too small in some ways around my waist and in my hips versus too big right now because I'd rather have it too small now and have it better in the future. But I do highly recommend the pattern, especially if you are someone who has a very large bust to waist ratio. I did add hooks to this one. So I have my front hook and then I have 2 hooks in the back, which are a little bit wackadoodle right now, that I did based off of the corset research that we had talked about earlier where they have the hooks in the front and the back. So the way I've been lacing this up is here. I actually will show you guys. So what I did is I laced this in and then I crossed it, brought them under the hooks here, and then I ended up go ahead and bringing it over to the front and then down to the hook here. So you can see it sits down here on the hip. I used silk lacings for this based off of Ladies Magazine recommendations and I have some thoughts on those. The silk laces. Now here's why I used silk ribbon for lacing. I found several references to this when I was researching corsets in the 1890s about using silk laces because they're easier to lace, they're low profile, so they don't create any bulk whatsoever, and they'll last a decent amount of time. So here's the one issue that I had with it, is that I accidentally got the hook of one of the back hooks to go through the silk ribbon last night when I was trying this all on for photographs, and it got stuck. It's kind of hard to get out. It does all the things that the magazines talk about. It's very low profile on the back. The laces will not show through any of my garments, any of my exterior garments. It does not create any bulk at my waist whatsoever. And it was really easy to lace because there's like 0 friction. So I am actually really happy with it overall. I just had that hole and that was kind of weird, but there you go. And with that, my friends, we have now researched, patterned, and made all of my 1890s undergarments, and it is time to move on to the actual ensemble itself, which I am using originals in my collection for patterning and construction information. Those videos will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. However, I will be back here next week with another video, so until then, my friends, I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your week, and I will see you back here next week with a new video. Bye! Woo-hoo-hoo, that was getting fast. Griffey, take that back to the office, please. Take that to the office. I don't hear you in the office, so go. Good boy. Juanita? Juanita? That neighborhood dog watch alert does not affect me. First, 2 eggs. Read the lines, Cox. It's not hard. You can do it. My snorzy cursor. Schnurzy. My snurzy cursor. Oh my God.